Hello, this is Maurice Brown here on February the 7th, 2022, and I figured it was time to make some type of document of my lifetime experiences with things like UFOs, aliens. I've had other experiences that I'll probably make a different video about that, like miracles and angels and supernatural spiritual things, a lot of stuff like that. But I'm going to probably be reading from my notes so I can keep on track of what I was trying to say. And so anyhow, we'll start off by talking about when I was about 8 or 9 years old. We lived on Gale Place in Rockville, Maryland. Excuse me. And I dug a chip out of my leg while I was showing it to my dad near these Dutch doors we had going from the kitchen into the family room. I dropped it, and we could never find it. It was like it just vanished, disappeared, whatever. It was a strange little chip. Maybe, I don't know, I guess I'd say about between a 16th to an eighth of an inch across and flat. It looked kind of like those boards that back in the old days they would solder components for transistors onto, like for transistor radio, those brown layer types of material. It looked kind of like that, but it was actually seemed more like I don't know, a different kind of material. But it disappeared. I remember having my dad having this look on his face that when I thought back about it, it seemed like that he knew something but wasn't saying anything. Anyhow, that was when I was around 8 or 9 years old. At the time of this filming, I'm making this, I'm 66 years old. When we moved from Gale Place, we went to Gainsborough Road in Rockville, Maryland. And at Gainsborough Road in mid-September 1966, there was a massive ship that was coming toward our house. And my dad was at work. My brother Don and my older sister Jenny were at home. My mom was at home. And my mom got hysterical when she saw this massive thing coming in our direction up in the sky. It was really huge. And it makes me wonder nowadays, why was she so frantically afraid of it? You know, it's like, what did she already know things about stuff like that? Because there had been things in the news from before I was born, back in the early 50s, that when the White House in Washington, D.C. was buzzed with like a dozen different UFOs. And that's recorded. You can find that on the internet about the White House around 1952. Anyhow, here it was in 1966 on Gainsborough Road. And so my mom and I and I know my older sister Jenny, we all ran in the house. And I remember my sister, I believe it was my sister Jenny, was ahead of me, and she headed into the basement. We had a breezeway between the house and the garage. So I remember when I got before I got to the door going to the breezeway, the air, it was like when you look at a hot pavement, asphalt road in the summertime, you can see like heat waves coming off it. Here in this house, when that ship was arriving over our house, and I was heading towards the garage, the breezeway door out of the kitchen, the air was all wavy, and it seemed like time was distorted or slowing down. It was something that I recall about at that area in the house. And I ran into the breezeway. We had windows on both sides of the breezeway between the house and the garage. And when you got down the steps from the kitchen into the breezeway, then right up against the wall of the garage in the breezeway was a door my dad had laid out flat like a table with stuff blocking it up. And I remember thinking at that time I was feeling rather excited, and so I was thinking of hiding under there, and then I realized there's nothing to hide under there. So I ran into the garage. Apparently, my older sister, uh, she was 11 and I was 10, and I hadn't. We were having a birthday coming shortly after that. Uh, I ran into the garage, and I remember hiding. I was like hiding behind I think it was a trash can in the garage, and and then these aliens showed up. And they were like about my height, at 10 years old. And they were, and when I saw them, they looked, from what I recall, they looked like your typical grays, like the, what typical grays look like, with the big eyes and the skinny bodies and the big head. I don't recall them actually speaking words to me at this time. I never had a regressive hypnotic thing or anything like that, because I don't necessarily trust those things. I don't want anybody planting information in my mind. I don't know about that. Anyhow, it was like, you know, throughout most of the years of my life, I never really knew what names to call when someone's communicating with you telepathically, which is basically what I recall what it was like. It was like when I saw them face to face, something happened where I was no longer afraid. And so my sister Jenny could tell you her side of the story. She could make a video about it. When they met her in the basement, because she went down to the basement through the breezeway down and stepped into the basement. That's where she was hiding. So when I first started remembering this, I remembered it throughout the years at different points for short periods of time. And I have a couple of friends throughout my life who remembered me talking about it. And so the first thing that I remembered was standing outside when my memory started coming back clear about this stuff, like maybe back in the 90s. So the first thing that I was recalling about it was looking up at the sky and seeing darkness, and I was thinking that it was the darkness of night, but it was because this craft was so huge that the darkness of it just covered my view. That was the first memory that I started having coming back about that. And those other things that I recalled as my mind started being renewed in the spirit to recall things better. And because I had become, I went through like 18 years of abstinence from drugs and alcohol. During those times, spiritually developing my life, disciplines, being cleansed physically and mentally and spiritually, my memory started coming back. And I gained confidence, assurance, and peace in my life, to where things that before that could have been blocked out from trauma, uh, I no longer had those fears or anything blocking things. So things started coming back, and so I started remembering things about this event in 1966 on Gainesboro Road, and I remembered being inside the craft, talking with my older sister Jenny about it. She remembers the smaller craft took us up to the big craft, like smaller UFOs. And there was a big, like a mothership, up way up in the air. I think it was like 1,000 feet, something. My youngest brother had talked with my dad about it, and had described what how far up in the air he thought it was, and how big he thought it was. And the family conversation said that he was talking with one of my uncles at our grandparents' house, and the uncle had asked my dad how big it was. And so it was like their questioning was along those lines that people used to describe things back in those years. was about holding up a newspaper, how big it would be compared to that. And so the story that I've heard through family was that my dad had replied that it was so big, the only way you could not see it would be to not hold the newspaper up at arm's length, but to wrap the newspaper around your head. So apparently, my older brother and I went with my dad after it had gone, and in the car, because he got home, and we tried to follow it, and it was just, there was no way we could follow it. Now, but I remembered inside this craft, one of the first memories I had about inside the craft was what it seemed like, like a city, and it was huge inside, and the outside seemed small. Maybe it was because my memory of the outside was of the smaller ship that took us up. But inside this huge ship, there was like long hallways that curved, and everything was like curved and rounded inside. Like when walls came to floors, I don't recall any 90-degree angles. Everything was like curved, even like portals that you could look at or see through. They were big arched and curved ways. But inside they had different rooms, and there was a lot of children about our age. We were inside, and apparently they were from our area. So there could be other people that have recall of this happening around in 1966 September when we were in Maryland. And so I bring this out for different reasons, because one strange thing, that the only people that I've been able to connect with about that neighborhood is my cousin Pippi. She doesn't have any memory of it at all. And I never got to talk, I never got the opportunity to actually talk with her parents about it, my Uncle Frank, Ray, and Pat. And they're gone now. I haven't been able to talk. I've searched. There's a lot of people in that neighborhood that were friends, and I've remembered their names, and I've searched all of them on the internet and paid for internet searches and can't find any of them. It's like, what is it? Is there something that they all feel like they don't want to be known publicly about because of that? Because one thing my sister remembers, she was in junior high. I was still in elementary, and she remembers the military coming to their school and telling everybody not to talk about it. Uh, and so that's really strange. Why would the military come to tell you not to talk about something if it was really not something? If it was, that people have tried to say it was a blimp or something. No way. I've seen blimps all my life, and this was not a blimp. And the military would not come to your schools and tell everybody to keep silent and not talk about it if it was a blimp. That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't make sense. So anyhow, these are things that I remembered about that incident in 1966. And after the ship had gone, like that night or the next couple of days following, in the basement we had a mattress on the floor, and my older sister and at least one other sister we were down in the basement jumping over the mattress, seeing how far you could jump, and actually I could clear the mattress. I could jump way farther past the length of the mattress. But one thing we remembered becoming afraid about was that a 10 and 11-year-old kid, me and my sister, when we jumped, we were going so high that we were nearly hitting the boards on the ceiling, which was from upstairs, the floorboards and rafters, whatever you call them. And there was a light bulb up there, and we came really close to hitting it. So it was kind of like having been given an ability of levitation, and I don't know, anything about that really, other than we experienced it, and my sister remembers talking about not doing it in case my mom came and saw us doing it. everybody could get all excited again or afraid. So we didn't do that. And it could be why I got into stuff throughout my life, like jumping over things, uh, leaping over things. And I did a lot of stuff like that throughout my life in my youth. Crazy daredevil things, like jumping off of Highland Elementary in the section where they were working on it years ago. And there was a big ditch up near the building, and further out was a pile of sand. And we had climbed up on the roof, me and two friends, and we were thinking about jumping off the roof into the pile of sand, clearing the ditch. And then we're about 3 stories high, and I'd run up towards the edge and stop, like, oh boy, not ready. Kind of scary, pretty high. And then all of a sudden, this roof hatch opens up, and the custodian pops his head up out of the school, like, "What are you guys doing up here?" And it's like, "I'm going." And I ran and I jumped and landed arms first in that sand pile. I dove like diving into the water, hands first. And so my arms stuck into the sand and my head stuck into the sand, and I was stuck like that until one of the other friends jumped off and helped pull me out. I could talk about all kind of stories of crazy things that I did, like daredevil, gravity defying type of things. I don't know, maybe trying to see if maybe I had this subconscious feeling about being able to levitate. I don't know. Anyhow, those were on Henderson. That was on Gainesboro Road in 1966. So let me see. I'm looking at my notes. I think I pretty much covered everything about that. And but yeah, okay. There was a time my older brother Don, he'd got bumped on the head or something like that from being mugged or something, and he claims he's lost a lot of memory. It could be there's things he doesn't want to remember because we all weren't saints or angels. But anyhow, at one time he remembered there was he was sent down the road to get my sister that was just under me in age, who was watching someone's kid. And I remember the debate about that because she was so young. There was like, how can she do that at her age? But anyhow, the people trusted her, and she was watching their kids. So my brother Don was sent to get her when all that stuff was happening with the aliens, the UFO, and all that. And he was hiding on the way back with her because he saw this other being that was like a mantis type of an alien, or you could call him an ant person or whatever. It was a bug-looking thing with a face, a head that looked more like a praying mantis. And so apparently there's more than one type of aliens sometimes that travel together. And I remember the one time I talked with him about that, and it brought back a memory, but he wasn't really remembering too much about it. But anyhow, that was something that happened then. And then we moved from Gainesboro Road to Henderson Avenue. And so I used to have dreams and stuff that were all related to those kind of events that happened. But around 1970, I was walking around through Kensington, Maryland with two friends, Terry and Jimmy. It was at nighttime. We were walking down St. Paul to the intersection of McComas, and there was a vacant lot there with all these trees at that intersection. And to this day, it's still a vacant lot. I believe they used to have some concrete slabs there, maybe sidewalks, like there may have been houses years and years ago. But around 1970, when Terry and Jimmy and I were walking, we were looking for this party, or I believe it was Patricia Austin's parents' house. They were having a party, and we were walking to that. So at that intersection of McComas and St. Paul, I wondered for years why I used to have this feeling. I used to get this strange feeling about that intersection. It was like a real mysterious, eerie feeling. I never knew why until in 2000 I reconnected with Terry over the internet through finding his sister and his mom or something, and then got his phone number. And I'm talking to him with him on the phone, and he remembered that incident at that intersection of St. Paul and McComas, where right above the treetop levels was this huge disc of UFO. I mean, it was massive. It was solid mass, but it had an appearance like goldish and orangish flowing plasma. I didn't know about plasma back then, but I've done a lot of research over the years. And so it was kind of like a liquid, fiery look to it, but it was solid at the same time. And we get to the party. I don't remember what happened. There was a lot of blackout that happened there, so that makes me think that something may have happened. Jimmy doesn't remember it at all when I talk to him. Terry remembers it and other incidences in his life clearly. But when I spoke with him about things I was experiencing, he brought that up, and when he started speaking about it, immediately it was like bam, my memory, I saw it and remembered it clear as day, and because I don't know why, there's a lot of becauses you could go about why things are blocked out and why things are recalled, whatever. So that was something. We get to that party at Patty's house, and everybody thought we were on drugs or something. When we told them what we saw, and we were like, "Nah, we wish we'd been trying to get buzzed all night, and we didn't have nothing, and we weren't on drugs. That really happened. We saw that happened, and I don't really know what happened when we saw it because it was blacked out from my memory from around 1970 till 2000 when I talked with Terry about it." So I'm not mentioning last names because I didn't get any clearance from anybody, those friends of mine, to talk about that with their last names anyhow. So that was something that we saw and that happened. It was very real. And those are amazing things. So when we lived on Henderson Avenue after Gainesboro Road, I believe it was sometime after I had moved out, and my youngest brother Joe, who was born on the night we moved into that house in Henderson, he was outside of that house one day. He tells me that I believe he was saying there was like a jet or something flying really low, real fast overhead, made a real loud noise, and it startled him, and he ran in the house. And so because of that, my parents were afraid that he might have been taken or that they might take him. And so my brother Joe was telling me how they described to him some of the stuff that happened on Gainesboro Road with the big, massive UFO and stuff like that. And a funny thing that I wonder about is why didn't my mom and my dad ever talk with me about that event? It's like they talked with other people, talked to my uncle, talked to my younger brother. I don't know, was my dad afraid of me because we went on it and whatever? And I don't know. I got, after all these years, I have more questions than answers, but I do have some memories. And so I got in my notes here, by 1987, I had moved to Tulsa, and that's where I met the lady, Maria Juanita Pata, that I married in 1988. And we had 2 sons. And it was from Oklahoma around the 4th month of the year 95 when we went to visit my sister Joan in Florida with her first husband Ed. When we were going from Oklahoma to Florida, there was something we experienced. My wife and I was noticing up in the sky that there was these like little balls of light, like little red dots, and there was a bunch of little red ones that were smaller that were moving all around them up in the sky, and we were amazed at that. I was watching it for a while. Then we there was right then we'd come on 95. We had to turn south on 95, and so right when that was happening, then the engine cut off. We still had electricity because the light was on. I put it in neutral and we coasted, and we came to a visitor center, and so we go to the visitor center, coasted, and happened to make it in there and come up to the building and parked. And the car wouldn't start. Something had happened to the car after we saw those lights in the sky, and the car wouldn't start. Right away, I'd like to bring to the point that back in 1966, at the same house where we had the big UFO, my older brother and at least one other neighbor was watching with us out in the street at night. We saw the same type of thing way up in the atmosphere. I mean, it's way up in the atmosphere. Not like a plane, not like anything. And back in '66, they didn't have stuff like we have nowadays. But we saw the same thing back in '95 going to Florida. And so one of my sons went with me into the visitor center to like the men's room and the concession stand, what are the machines to buy, snacks and drinks. And so I had the hood popped on the car, and eventually, about an hour or something later, the car starts. And so then we went on to my sister Joan's house and visited them for a couple of days in Florida, and then headed up north and took one of my nieces with us up north from Florida. But at that instant, from that situation there in Florida, at the visitor center, or the rest station, whatever it was, my wife, we called her Janie, it was her nickname, Janie Maria Juanita. We had talked about that years ago before she passed on. And there was a serious condition of missing time for her. It was like she thought it was just a couple of minutes, and it was like at least an hour. And so there was a big missing time episode there, from seeing those lights in the sky and the motor cutting off. One of us had missing time. I don't remember exactly if it was me or her. But anyhow, that happened in '95. And so I used to have feelings and stuff about those things. And her mom had come up to visit us in Oklahoma. One time she came up with, I think, one of her mom's sisters or something. They'd come up on the bus. And I remember talking with my wife's mom about things like this. And she had experiences about things like that. It wasn't a strange thing to her, to have experienced those things. But in June of '95, we moved from Oklahoma to Arizona, to Phoenix, so I could attend the Motorcycle Mechanic Institute, MMI. And I graduated in September of '96. And I remember when I was going to MMI, I was going to school at night, like 5 or 6 in the evening, something like that, till almost midnight, and working in the mornings at the apartments. I had a job at the apartments we got, and so there I was. One night in the apartment, I was awoke by my sons in the bedroom next to us in the apartment, screaming out, calling for me. And so I wake up in the middle of the night, hearing they're calling out for me, and I look, and walking from the left side of the bed, our head was by the wall, the outside wall, and the dividing wall between our bedroom and the boys' bedroom was on my left, and my wife was sleeping on my left. To my right, walking towards the foot of the bed, when I opened my eyes, I see was this creature. I call it a reptilian because the way its skin looked. It was about anywhere between 5 and 6 feet tall. But when I opened my eyes, it turned its head and looked right at me. When we looked eye to eye, the instant that our eyes looked on each other, it shot off out the closed window to my right, like it had interdimensional ability or something, whatever. Just went through the window. It was a window there, so I say it went out through the window. It could have been the wall, whatever. It just went out, and Vominos, it was gone, like the snap of a finger. But I remembered that short moment before it took off, looking at its eyes because its pupils were uh, were slits like this. They were up, like they were like a cat's pupils or reptilian, like a snake's pupils. That's why I figured it was reptilian because of I remember there was red. I'm trying to remember where its pupils red or where its eyes red. There was red in its eyes. But anyhow, it took off. So I get up, I go in my son's room, and they had told me there was two different types, different than what I saw. There was two of them in their room, and both of them were different. One of them they described as like a shadow being, like a just all blackness, and the other one was something else. But those two also shot out. Uh, that was at one time that was our bedroom, and we switched over. But at that time, they were in the room next to us that had a sliding glass door. We're on the second floor of the apartment. There was 2-story apartments in Phoenix, and so yeah, they said that they shot out through the closed glass door of that balcony sliding glass door. But there was all kinds of commotion going on outside. I opened the apartment door. I look outside, and all the grounds down on the floor, the grounds of the apartment, and outside of the apartment, out near the road, there was all kinds of people, like military, police, and people in suits, all over the place. And there was at least one helicopter in the air. All kinds of stuff was going on. And I was only getting a couple hours of sleep a night, so I was tired. And I'm just like, man, I need to go back to sleep. And I remembered this old story someone told from a church or a radio or something about this guy years ago named Smith Wigglesworth. He was some kind of great guy in Christianity, and he had woke up one night, and they told the story that he said that he wakes up and sees the devil at the foot of his bed, and he just said, "Oh, it's just you," and went back to sleep, describing his confidence and his faith and his peace because of his relationship with God. He wasn't worried about the devil. He just went back to sleep. So I thought about that, and I'm like, I need sleep. None of this makes sense. So I just went back to sleep. And so that's what happened. Uh, that was like about a year before the big thing that happened. I think it was March 13th, 1997, when the famous Phoenix lights happened. That was a big ordeal. A lot of people heard about it. A lot of people reported about it. There was a whole bunch of stuff. I don't need to go into that because everybody knows about the Phoenix lights. I guess everybody does. That was in '97. And that was like a little after a year that I had graduated from MMI. I drove a city bus. It was like a city bus. It was excuse me, it was a bus that would go from parking lots to all the terminals around Sky Harbor Airport. That was my job that I got right after school. I did that for almost a year, and that's what I was doing when the Phoenix Lights happened. There was a lot of things that happened that night, March 13th, because I was doing an employee route that night. I was picking up employees from the terminals. They had like 4 different terminals, looping all around them in the bus, and then coming to the different employee parking lots. I pull into the employee parking lot. I believe I was heading east into the parking lot, and the arm opens up, the the guard arm comes up, and I'm rolling in. And I'm one of those buses where the front wheels are actually behind the driver's seat, and the front of the bus is sticking out. So they had it designed with a very large, high windshield in the front where you had a huge amount of view of everything. I noticed, and I had to stop the bus because I saw these three balls of light just streaking across the sky. And I'm thinking, wow, I have never seen shooting stars last so long. They were uniformed together and they're just shooting across the sky. And I had to stop the bus because they started zipping and zagging, going all different directions. And they were like really high in the atmosphere. Some of the military tried to say that there was flares, but I'm sorry, because these were really high in the sky and they weren't coming down. They were streaking across the atmosphere at high speeds. And then they start zipping and zagging. Flares don't zip and zag like that in unison. And then one of them just is like you didn't see it, like it went off or went out or whatever. And then the other two shot south in an southeasterly direction. And then the one that went off came back on and it shot off in that same direction. And I'm like asking these guys and gals on the bus that worked at the airport, what in the world's going on? Did y'all see that? And there was like, yeah, there's been reports of all kinds of stuff going on all night. And that was the night of the big Phoenix light. So there was a lot of stuff that happened that night. But I saw that. And there's no earthly explanation of what I saw with those three lights and them zipping and zagging. That was pretty noteworthy thing to bring out that I saw there in '97. So I'm looking through my notes real quick here. I believe I saw like 5 different times of seeing UFOs when I was in Phoenix. And so another time while I was still driving the bus for Sky Harbor Airport, that's not the name of the company, but the company had me, that hired to do those buses, had me working at Sky Harbor Airport. And so at one point I was doing service to Tempe University. And part of the route would go through the university all around it and then go up through town. And it was basically, I think it was free for anybody. The university paid for it. So the students could have, but they would go out to the Phoenix Desert Botanical Gardens. And I had a layover there. I had to wait. So there was all these older people. I was still pretty young at the time. And these older people were going out to the Desert Botanical Gardens. And so they were all off the bus, excuse me. And they were heading over to the entrance to go into the gardens. And I'm out of the bus, standing around, and I look up to the, pretty close to me, and I see something in the sky just hovering, and it was in view. It was, maybe as high as a helicopter flies, but it was just hovering there, and it was the shape of like if you took clay pots or like they come down like that, and there's like a band around the top. If you took 2 of those and one a little smaller in depth and put it top to top, that's about what this thing looked like in the sky up there like that. It was like that, the shape of it. And in the middle, it was like something was spinning around. And that could have been a military surveillance thing. I don't know. They might have had blades going different ways, whatever, just to surveil and, But that was something I saw, and no one ever explained what that was. I remember watching it, I'm looking at it, and I would get a funny feeling sometimes, like, not wanting to say something. And I'm looking over at all these elderly people going in to the gardens and looking back at the sky and looking back at them, and I'm hoping that one of them would look at me and see I'm looking up. I just, for some reason, didn't want to say anything. I don't know why. But no one saw it, no one looked up, so I saw that. And that was like this. That's like the second time I saw the second UFO type of thing that I saw aside from that reptilian in Phoenix. Another time, we had gotten a travel trailer so that when we moved, it'd be easier. We'd just pack it up and hook it up with this old truck I bought to move from there. My wife wanted to go to Texas, so we had gone from Oklahoma to Arizona, and she wanted to go to Texas when I was done. So anyhow, that's why I had the trailer. We're in a trailer park after the apartment. When one of the other times in the trailer park, I'm with at least one of my sons, and we look to the west and we see something that looks like a UFO in the sky with a beam of light coming down angular out of it. And it was at quite a distance. And we were looking at it thinking, what in the world is that? It doesn't seem to be going up or down or moving. It had a beam below it coming down, way down. And it didn't look like, propulsion or anything like that, just like a light beam. And there was some Hispanic guys hanging around outside their trailers in that trailer park. And I'm looking at them saying, look at that. What do you think about that? And they're just kind of like, I've learned years later, some people, especially a lot of Hispanics that I met, if there's like a tension or a stress or whatever, sometimes they'll just laugh. I guess it's not unusual for anybody, no matter what your nationality, to laugh at something as a way to just, not have to worry about it. So that was like the third time. And then there was another time across the intersection at that trailer park was a Circle K. It was at nighttime. And I see up in the sky, there was other people outside the store looking downtown over the city. We saw this massive thing that was like a huge UFO. And it was orangish, like that one that we saw in 1970 over St. Paul and McComas. But it was way bigger. It was huge. It was like, several blocks maybe across in diameter. From what I recall, it was like disc shaped. And it was orangish glowing. And so I'm looking at other people that are standing there at the store, and I'm saying, do you see that? Do you see that? And everybody's just kind of like, here, we're looking at it. And no one ever gave an explanation of what that was. And so there was another time while we were still in that trailer park, my two sons and I were in this little Toyota pickup. We were driving somewhere towards, from our trailer park area, like towards Black Canyon Freeway that divided through Phoenix. And we saw on the other side of the freeway up in the air this thing that I thought was an internally lit blimp. And so we were driving towards the freeway, got just about as far as we could towards the freeway. And by the time, before we could get there, it had moved off way south to where you couldn't see it anymore. It had moved really quick, very quick. And so I've never seen heard of any blimp that could move that kind of territory that fast. But before it took off, I remember looking at it. It was like a oval, wider than an egg. So if you took an egg and ovaled it out more, it was about like that. And it had this emblem on the side of it that didn't look like any kind of a language or an emblem that I'd seen anywhere. And then it took off. So there's like 5 different times we'd seen those things in Arizona. And yeah, Arizona's a pretty strange place. A lot of weird things happen over there. And I got this page 3 of notes that I'm looking at real quick. I'm just glancing. Yeah, it's talking about those things I already talked about. I read about those. And so anyhow, we moved from Phoenix to Texas because my wife, she wanted to. I'm going to later on talk about the stuff that happened while we were in Phoenix, because there was a lot of amazing things that happened where I underwent like remote viewing and precognitive dreams and like notions like waking dreams and different things. And it was a very spiritual evolutionary process that I was going through of experiencing things. And during that time, I wrote a lot of notes and diagrams. And at one time, I was thinking, I'll probably just talk about this before the moving away from there because I'm already doing it. I met a guy who, because it was one time in my life, I went to a MUFON meeting when we were there in Phoenix. And while I was there, I met this guy, and something was telling me, befriend yourself with that guy. It was the first time he'd ever been there, first time I'd ever been there. And none of the people that were part of the meeting were trying to separate us and do whatever. And I'm just like, no. And I'm holding on to this guy like, y'all get away, we're talking. And so it was meant for me to meet this guy. We called him Uncle Eeyore because at one time he didn't have a house or was kicked out from his family, something like that. Like uh, uh, Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore, when the donkey didn't have a place to live. So we called him, that kind of joking, they gave him the name Uncle Eeyore. So his name was Ernie. I won't tell anything about his name. He's a very private person, very intelligent person, very learned student. But he saw some drawings that I had been making over the years, and he goes, "Do you know what this is?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I think I'm just doodling. I didn't know what it was." And he recognized those things, and so months would go by, and I would be drawing out things. I don't really know if you'd call it like faith writing or whatever. I would just get these ideas and these notions and dreams, and I would draw out things that I saw in dreams, and I could talk about the dreams because I had for years I would go through precognitive dreams to where I would see in a dream, and this happened in Maryland, it happened in Tulsa, and it was happening now a whole bunch more when we were living in Phoenix, where I would clearly dream what was happening the next day. Anyhow,